There we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'barei.
Man,
Right. Good morning, folks. So continue with the mimer, actually the review. So, excuse me. God creates the world in a certain manner called klal uprat, a general principle, and from there the details come. On one level, it's because on details come from the general principle, and the detail of this world and our engagement in the details of our lives allows us to connect to God in a way that He's beyond this world, that we are a reflection of the divine. That is, we are only but a reflection of the divine. Bittul b'metzias, complete self-effacement. But now we're learning something deeper, more profound, and that is we don't just reflect the divine the way it's beyond this world, but we touch etzem ha'or, the essential, quintessential light. Meaning, in a sense, we touch God Himself as opposed to God as creator. Like in a human being, there's the quintessential, essential light that you are. And then there's the extension of the person, how that light reaches beyond them. That's the way I am explaining these words. And the mimer, the words are the extension of light versus the essence of light. Which means like this. Through our engagement in the details of life, the details of serving God, which is right, that's the key over here. The details of serving God. You can come to the core essence and touch you can touch much more. And as a result, bring something new to the world that even God as creator has not brought to the world. That's really what. And there's two metaphors that the Rebbe uses here to give us an understanding of this. Because till now, what we're understanding is the most the detail could do is reveal it, it reveal the general principle because it emerges from the general principle. They say, no, actually, through the detail, you can reach beyond the general principle. So the first one he gives is from Bina versus Chochmah, but I'm going to use the one of speech because I think that's something we all experience. Bina Chachma might not be as clear a notion. Uh, we've said it, so just again to reiterate, because it's such a powerful point. Your speech, my speech, emerges from my thoughts, right? That's where it emerges from. Yet thought is one faculty, speech is another faculty, that they're separate from each other, even though it emerges from there, they're separate from each other. And indeed, speech comes from a higher root source than thought. It comes from a higher root source. What does that mean? What does those words mean that comes from a higher root source? As a result, you don't, through speech, through the faculty of speech, right? Faculty of speech means the power of speech, right? That's what we mean here. Not the value of your speech, not like, say nice things. That's not what we're saying here. Talking about the faculty of speech, although your speech evolves from your thoughts, but the faculty of speech is greater than your thoughts. How do we see that? Because when you have a problem and you think it through, you you know you think it through. Wonderful. Excuse me. You think it through. You you work it through. Wonderful. What happens when you speak it through? Whether another person is just a sounding board and just listening, which can be sufficient, you gain new insight into the issue, to the problem, that you wouldn't have had necessarily or as readily as if you just thought it through. Speech brings out something that was not even in the original thought because you thought it through. And now when you're speaking it through, oh, more pops into your head. Why? Why more pops in? Because speech draws from a higher place, from a greater place. Because ultimately, actually, just to, you know, what did God create us for? Well, one of the terms for a human being um, is medaber, a communicator, speech. Because through speech, that's where we begin to connect with another. Or, I don't know, we begin, that's where we actually connect with another through speech. So that's the intended purpose. Not thinking. Now you need to think in order that you can speak. And again, it emerges from there. That's the order of the creative process. But what's the intent? To be thinkers or to be communicators? Well, thinking communicators, absolutely. But that's not the point. The point being is communicator is greater intent. So its root source is greater. And that's why when you talk something through, you will gain something that you wouldn't have if you only thought it through. You wouldn't have that. Now, that's a metaphor for us to understand that through the and when you talk it through, you're talking through the details of whatever needs to be dealt with in the finer details of discussion. That's where new innovative ideas will pop into the head that were not there when you thought it through merely. So, which means that the detail has a greater source than the general principle. And therefore, through the detail, you can get more than you would just. In other words, the details aren't merely emerging from the general principle. Through the detail, you can elicit, draw down things that were not in the original general idea and thought. Yeah. Is that clear? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. Andrew, Michael. Okay.
Yes.
A very, very powerful idea that gives us, an appreciation of it gives us an understanding now, right, in the analog that when God creates the world, so with the one statement versus the 10 statements, and the 10 comes from the one. So one would think that the most you can get is to the one. And what is the one? Is the encompassing light of God that's beyond this world, that in divine service is the way we explained it, which is a very lofty level, is that everything is a oneness, meaning I don't have a hand, I don't have a foot, I don't have a cup of coffee. All this is a reflection of the divine. Now, of course, a cup of coffee is not the same value as a hand, but in this manner, it's irrelevant. All of it is encompassed in the oneness of God, and I just reflecting that in every aspect. Yeah, it's pretty powerful. But now we're going beyond that, right? Because the root source of the detail of creation is now, as we just explained, right, is comes from a greater place than the general principle. Therefore, through our avodah, through our divine service, and it's only through our divine service that we can come to this, right? In other words, God, in the creative power, creation, in the act of creating, we have no access to this, but God gives us access to this through our divine service. Because of our divine service, dealing with the detail of life, the detail of God's creation, which in that detail, right, remember, there's a duality. There's a duality. I could use this and have everything used in a self-serving way and choose the opposite of the service of God. L'chaim.
Time.
That potential is real. So therefore, through my engagement with the details of God's creation that I serve God with, I'm able to get beyond even the general statement of God in Maimer Echad in one statement, and I'm able to reach to the core essence of the light. Beyond, even from the extension of light, It's pretty heavy. Even beyond the extension of light, the extension of light is God's will for the world. So I'm getting even beyond God's will. So where are you getting to? God himself. Before he had a will for the world. Whoa. Let that settle in. That's what I'm touching.
Deep stuff.
Yeah, very heavy. So similarly, also, when it comes to drawing down Torah, as we're learning now, first it's drawn down in a general principles we said, the teacher needs to teach in a concise, point, that from there all the details come. But these details, again, which are details that emerge from the general principle, just like the Gemara emerges from the Mishnah, just as the oral teachings, the oral tradition emerges from the written word, right? Yet at the same time, there's a power in the detail of Torah, and the oral Torah, as we're speaking about over here, and that detail that is and that emerges from the general principle of the Dibur Echad, the one word that God, that is including all of the 10 commandments, and even more than that, when you go into the details of the Torah, of the written Torah, the oral tradition, you even reach beyond the general one, general of all inclusiveness of the one statement of God that includes everything of Torah. This is what we say, that everything that a seasoned student of the Torah will in the future innovinate, right? I said that right? Meaning there will be novel, will be new specifically, meaning what it means. How could there be new? It has to come from the general principle. So it is coming from there. It's emerging from there. That's why everything has to be right. That's why all other faiths that take Judaism, take what they call the Old Testament and so on. That's why it's all completely erroneous, because it's not emerging from it. It's just it's not coming from there. It's making up its own fairy tale. And even sometimes, and even any devout Jew or learned Jew, if they're not taking it from a source, that's why Rambam's books in his days, people didn't accept it, because he didn't give the source of where he gets what he's saying. And even though he writes about that, because we always have to quote the source. Where is this emerging from? Where is this coming from? Yet, here, what are we saying? There's something new. Because through the great effort in Torah, you draw down from the aspect of Torah the way it is rooted in the hiddenness, the essential hiddenness of the Ein Sof of God, which is beyond the way the Torah is brought into drawing down, into being revealed. And this is through when you really make an effort, and you then can find Like if it says you when you make an effort, then you will find, right? Meaning you'll find, just like you find a lost object unexpectedly, right? So likewise over here, you're going to find something unexpectedly, meaning more than what you had, where it emerged from, right? Through your great effort in the study of the minutiae and the detail of Torah, and you will then innovate. You'll innovate, right? As the Rebbe is doing here in this Hasidic discourse and teaching this idea over here, and through this, and especially when it comes to the Pnimis HaTorah, the inward teachings of the Torah, which is a sampling of the Torah of Mashiach, we will then merit to the revelation of the teachings of Mashiach that will come beyond what we are an awareness, where it'll be like we find something that was unexpected, in other words, novel, right? Even though it emerges from this, but yet it's still novel at the same time, as we just said, because it's rooted in the hiddenness of God in Himself, which is the source of Torah, of course, and through the great effort, new understanding, new teachings that will reveal the essence, the core essence of God that is without a garment, as was at the time of the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and it will be even greater with the coming of Mashiach and Vikar of Mamish speedily in our days. Psh, wow. All right. Amazing.
Wow.
Okay.